Sewing isn't the most sexiest of things or most badass skill, but it is an important thing to know. Regardless if you're repairing, a jacket, a sweater, a pair of pants, some lacings on a backpack that you have, it is something extremely important for somebody to know how to do when you're living remotely in the bush. My mother personally taught me how to sew. She taught me how to sew on a sewing machine, taught me how to sew buttons, how to hem pants, how to repair holes, various clothing items, as ultimately I destroyed them as a kid. Ancient cultures as well have sewn all their clothes. They've sewn their packs, their jackets, their hides. They've essentially taken two materials together and connected them through the use of some sort of cordage, something like a plant fiber, a piece of animal hide, sinew, you name it. They have found the ability to connect things together to make blankets, jackets, vests, pants. Sewing is extremely important. I sew today is relatively simple in design. Simple pouches like this with running stitches along the side. Knife sheaths, whether it's something I can carry around my shoulder, something I can throw around my neck. The joining of two pieces of material, whether it's an animal hide or something that you need to repair, and connecting them together is going to give you some longevity in your personal gear, as well as being able to maintain all your personal equipment when you're out in the bush. Small pouches to carry whatever you might need is a very simple way of taking a piece of scrap material, putting it together, and having a pouch. Hide bags, which is essentially one animal's hide folded on half, with the edges ultimately connected together to give you that one elongated pouch you can throw over your shoulder, head in the bush. Small backpacks with pockets for carrying hand drills, small items, even the shoulder straps and the entire bottom can be connected together and ultimately give you another tool. A big backpack like this for carrying larger quantities of gear. You can see it's all sewn together. Everything is connected through a leather thong, whether it's a shoulder strap, containment straps, or the actual bag itself. All of this is sewn using the following techniques. My sewing kit is pretty rudimentary, but it is the basic thing that you will need to know. The primary tools that I use are awls. Bone awls, typically from the leg of a deer, broken and filed down into a point. Any coarse rock will give you that point you're looking for. These other guys are just simple bone awls. They're not as extravagant as these ones over here. It's just a bone shard that's been filed down, ground down into a point that allows me to poke holes in leather. This one here is just another bone awl that I can keep on my wrist, so while I'm manipulating the leather, doing anything, I can flip it back up and continue to poke holes. Next are my antler plugs. Now these are pretty simple contraptions and just gives me an opportunity to poke a hole through leather with a little bit of simplicity. Say I'm gonna poke a hole in my leg pad, I just place my little bone plug underneath the leather and I give it a little tension and it allows me to poke my hole. With this, I don't have to try to hold it between my fingers, anything to that extent. You can get the result you're looking for. I can poke a hole. It gives me the ability to reach an edge, poke my hole, it also gives me the opportunity to maintain a distance by using the edges of my plug as a measuring tool. So then all I'll simply do is I'll take this hole that I just punched, place it on the edge of my plug, pinch, drill my hole. This will give me even spacing the whole way through. So there's two holes. Now I can evenly splice by using my plug as a measuring device the whole way down an edge as I'm looking to connect it to another piece. Lastly are my bone needles. Bone needles are really good if you have a soft material that you can use the tip of the needle to poke the hole and then draw your string through. Sometimes it's good once you have a series of holes, you can use it to quickly sew up those joining edges. And then an extra piece of bone that I can grind down into a bone needle is my basic sewing kit. And the reality is, All you need is one bone sewing awl. So not long ago, I made a little Bushman's Basic knife. Just a kind of a laurel leaf shaped knife with some wrapping around it to give myself a little bit of a handle. Fireboards, processing game, real simple, real basic functioning with this knife. But it needs a sheath. So with a leather thong and 2 blanks that I cut out of some bark tan, I'm going to make a sheath for this Bushman Basic. And one of the hardest things to do is get that long leather thong. Once you have material and you have a good quantity of it, it's not hard to cut out your shapes with a stone blade, a pair of scissors, or even a knife. What if you're in the bush, you have some animal hide, or maybe you have a t-shirt or some canvas, and you need to cut that in a really, really long strip. This is my cutting log. This is what I will build in a bow. I'll use this as a backstopping, or if I'm going to cut lacing, I'm going to use it as my base. There's a brand new piece of white ash. I've got some bow staves drying from this. You got to have a backstopping when you're chopping, slicing, or cutting a leather thong. So this is the piece of leather material that I have. This is a piece of bark tan, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a long strip out this side. You can see this one side is flat the whole way through because this is where I'm continuously cutting leather thongs out of. When using a knife, all you have to do, 1 is make sure your knife is sharp, and 2, stick your knife in a portion of the wood. Make sure it's going to be stable, hand over the top, give it a few pops. And all I'm going to do is take my knife and I'm going to start running it down the edge. And I'm giving it a small slice. As I'm doing this, I'm watching. I'm pinching one side right here, and I'm using that, my thumb and my finger, as my gauge to keep the same width the whole way down. Smooth as fast in this. You can't be rushing it. It takes a little bit of time, but you'll get a consistent thickness of your leather thong the whole way through. Kind of working the hide up and down. Now you can do this with a small piece of material, and it's called a continuous cut. Imagine I had a piece of material that was this big. I just start around an edge and work a concentric circle all the way to the inside, and then I have a longer piece. It's a little tedious, but you will get the same universal thickness the whole way through. And with the stone flake, obviously sharper is better when we're trying to cut a leather thong out. For this, I'm just going to use a piece of obsidian. Stick it in there nice and tight. Watch your fingers. And it's cut sharper than the blade. Just the same old up and down motion the whole way through. You'll get one leather thong used for lacing. Up and down, up and down. You can't pull it through, but a little bit of a sawing motion, you'll get the best result. Good piece of obsidian or any sharp flake will allow you to cut a leather thong for lacing when you're looking to sew up some pouches, packs, or repair some gear. Now what I really want to be able to obtain here is my holes as close as I can along the edge. That's going to give me plenty of room for my blade to sit on the inside. More importantly, my blade has some wide hips right here, so I can't make it too tight to the top, otherwise I won't be able to pull out that blade. Now even though these aren't exactly the same, that's okay, because as I lace this up, all of this stuff will kind of get cinched down and it will house this blade nice and neat. So first things first, I use a plug and I will use one of my blanks here, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to start putting holes down the side. Once I've done my holes down the entire side of this, keeping the top open, I'm going to do a couple perforations to match the location of my holes as well as the number of holes from one side all the way around. Simply place my material over my plug and I make my first hole. When I make my holes, I'm not driving it in. As you can see on all my awls, there's a tip and they all kind of widen out a little bit. That just gives me a little bit of resistance when I'm going through. I'm not looking to punch a hole as wide as my bone portion here. I'm going to go about that far. Leather has a tendency, once a hole is pushed through it, to kind of somewhat close up. It's not really closing up in the form that it's shrinking by any means, but you're stretching the material to puncture the hole, and then it's going to kind of gently return to its original shape and form. Before I start, I will just make a couple perforation holes just to give me an idea on where I want to run my lacing. This is kind of like my follow the lines, if you will. Kind of each one of these holes gives me an idea. Let's say I mess one up, I just kind of put a line through it. It's just giving me a visual on saying that's a hole, that's not a hole. Down to the tip, all the way back up. Alright, perforated holes the whole way around. Now I'll use these as my guide and start making all the necessary marks. Sometimes on these corners I'll just put it right over my finger and I'll pinch that other side and just slowly work it through. One hole. I just go through and put that hole in there just before I see that tip. If I want, I can come around to the back side so I'm not overstretching my leather and just kind of connect. Just a little bit. I don't want to drive my awl all the way through the leather. Once I've got a little room to kind of hold on the sides for my plug, you'll feel the awl when you're working that plug go through that leather when you're holding it over the top of the plug. It's just one after another. A little bit of a stretch. Awl. Every motion is a little bit of a twist that gives you a little bit of that stretch over the plug. If it's real loose, you're not going to get that kind of desired entry through it. Now if your perforations are kind of wearing out, stop, do them again. This is your guide. Leather is stretched, all going through into the plug, gently moving on to the next. This is, in my mind, one of the easiest ways to drive holes close to your edge without ripping and blowing out that edge. Does it happen? Yeah. Once I come down to the tip, that's my guide. I'm just going to do it right over the fingers, gently, until I make entry through. There's the other one. Just on those real tight spots, it's best to use your fingers. You've got to sharpen up your awl. Don't need a lot, you'll get back into it. Oh, just one after another. Keep working it through. Use the plug, stable platform. Before you know it, it'll be all the way through. There we go. Before you know it, whoosh, holes along one whole side. Now for the next sequence, all I'm going to do is I just want to mirror these two pieces together. I'm going to put my fingers in and I'm just going to do those perforations the whole way around. I'm not trying to move my material all that much. I want to avoid moving it because that could throw all my hole alignment off. So down to the bottom, switch hands. I'm not looking to make a hole. I'm looking just to mirror and match the same number of holes the whole way down. I'm not stretching. If I stretch, an uneven hole placement, and when you go to lace this up, you'll have extra holes that aren't lined up. You'll be scratching your head. Remove my top one. You can see on this next one all those easily identifiable perforations. Now, of these two pieces, the first one I did was a little bit smaller. You kind of just see a little bit of an edge sticking out right through here. It's okay. What I'm going to do is go through, make all my holes for this guy, and then I'll take a piece of obsidian after I do my holes and just trim it up just a smidge. Alright, they are all done. 1 and 2. Now let's connect the pieces. When I'm doing this, I'm going to have inside touching and these two together. What I'm going to do to one of these little ends is I'm going to take a piece of obsidian and kind of scrape it down so it's a little point. Just taking that tip and just giving it a little bit more of a refined point, just like that. Kind of roll it between my fingers, make it a little bit more rigid, if you will. Now, I'm not done with my awls, because as I'm running this through, my awls are going to help me kind of push that leather thong through there. And for this one, I'm going to take the material and I'm going to half it out. So I've got both of my pigtails here and then a loop right here. I'm going to take this loop and I'm just going to put a little bit of a knot in there. It's just going to give me a spot where I know not to keep pulling all the way through. It's just a marker, something that I can untie. So then essentially, as my sheath is being formed, the knot will be at the bottom that I'll untie. This piece will run all the way up through here. This side will run all the way up through here. One hole right there. Run this guy through. When I pull my leather thong through my leather, I like to hold it between my fingers. I don't want to pinch it and pull it because I could wind up tearing out this edge. So I try to run it just straight through the hole to that knot. And then I know that's my left side bottom hole. You just got to do this really in the beginning to make sure everything lines up. And then I'm going to run this straight through that left side hole. I'm pulling my lacing through and I'm getting a couple kind of thick spots. Just come back with your knife, piece of obsidian, and just kind of shave it down just a little bit. You're just trimming it. You don't want a lot of resistance rolling through there. Otherwise you could wind up breaking it all. Alright, so I've got those two pieces. Now this is an important portion. As I'm running this stitch, I want to keep pulling this material so the softer side is kind of folding over my actual edge. And I'm going to keep essentially coming from the top down with my little pointy piece of leather into that next hole. Take my awl, just make sure they are nice and wide. Alright, so that's the material going through both sides. Kind of make that pilot hole. Run this guy straight through both. There's that one. Now I'm going to simply fold it over the top, make sure my holes line up. Come over the top, put it through, pull that little pigtail, and you're just repeating these steps over and over, just like that. Good match. Through each time. Next hole. Sometimes when you get a little bit to the top area, you kind of have to separate the two and pull it through. Now once I've done one complete side, I'll go through with my awl and just make sure that everything is nice and tight. I'm just sticking it underneath the lacing, kind of pulling it out from the one side, the bottom side, and I'll run it the whole way. See, I got a little bit of room right here. I'll just go to that next one, pull, make sure it's nice and tight. One side done. I'm going to leave this here until I've determined how I want to hang this from my belt or my neck. I'm going to come back to my knot and I'm going to untie it, and I'm going to start lacing it up the other side the whole way up. Feels right. There. That is the sheath. A little stretch. Looking good. Let's see how she holds the blade. Nice, all the way to the top. Holds the blade nicely. I like it. Alright, now what to do with these guys. Let's secure this here for a little bit of a neck knife, like that. Yeah, that works. Okay. Alright. Blade in, and I'm just rubbing it on all the surfaces. All that lacing is getting rubbed in. I'm getting some animal fat on this actual neck piece, down all the sides. Essentially it's acting kind of like an oil, and you're oiling up the sheath. Just slowly work it in. There we go. Looks pretty even. Alright, when everything is all said and done, you have taken bone awls with some leather lacing, a leather thong, and sewed yourself up a nice little knife sheath to hold a quick little stone knife, Bushman's Basic, and you are good to go. You've seen the backpacks, you've seen the pouches. Being able to craft some manner of carrying device for your equipment, for your gear, for a stone blade is pretty paramount when you're out in the backcountry. What it boils down to is being able to take stuff you can resource from the land and turn it into something that will allow you to ultimately thrive out in the backcountry. Alright, there you go. Sewing up a sheath. Appreciate you watching.